welcome everyone to July's episode of Road to Recovery. So Road to Recovery is our series of commentaries on the COVID-19 crisis. And every month we talk with a business or a thought leader who not only survived the crisis, but thrived in some way and actually has some really positive experiences and lessons that we can all learn from as we recover from a really difficult year, and also hold on to some of the really positive and good things that have come out of the challenges of remote working. So I'm Becky Statham, for anyone who doesn't know me. I'm one of the principal consultants at R2R Performance, and I work with businesses on future-proofing their HR functions in terms of data, insight, culture, processes, technology, and the future that we're trying to support obviously looks quite different because of the pandemic. So today I'm stepping in for our director, Tom Holmes. He's taking a well-earned summer holiday, so he's taking a break today. And for anyone who doesn't know Varan, we're a consultancy. We're about 80 people focusing purely on HR and finance problems and transforming HR and finance from a people, process and technology perspective. So if you have any questions on HR and finance transformation, feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn, or you can give us a call. And today, I'm really, really pleased to be joined by a long-term friend. So we've known each other maybe 5-6 years or more now. And Gu is also a friend of Varan and our network, myHRcareers, which many of you are members of. And Gu is the founder of Curated Abilities, which she'll tell us a bit more about shortly, which I love the name of Gu. So I don't know how you came up with that name. It's an awesome name. I love it. And Gu's business and Gu's mission in life is to support deaf and disabled people to nurture their ideas, their aspirations, and to be better able to access and enjoy work. So Curated Abilities works with individuals and also with businesses to establish working environments that are more inclusive. And Gu's own experience is really critical to her passion and expertise after losing her hearing at 3 years old. So really fascinating person, one of my favorite people to speak to. So thank you so much for coming on the webinar today, Gu.
Thank you, Becky. I'm really excited to be here.
Good. So when Gu and I were talking recently about her experience of the pandemic and the transition that lots of businesses are trying to make to support all of their employees to be more productive and happy, I learned a lot and I had a lot of fun. And we felt actually that there were things that everyone could learn from the deaf community. So whether you're hearing, deaf, whether your business is doing this really well or less well, I thought there were lots of questions that would be really helpful for everyone. And also Gu is very open and very down to earth. So I really want you to all ask any questions that you have. No question is off the cards. Ask your questions, use the Q&A, use the chat, and we'll have a good conversation. So I'm going to jump in with my first question, which is an open question. And actually it goes all the way back to March last year. And I want you, Gu, to tell us about your experience of going into lockdown. So what was that like for you, for your community, your business? How did that feel back in March?
Well, back in March, it was all like a bit scary, and I'm sure it was really scary for everybody. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And in the deaf community, I think language was a huge barrier for everybody, where not everybody's English is their first language. British Sign Language is their first language, so they required an interpreter. And what there was a lack of British Sign Language on TV when Boris Johnson and announcing on the news about COVID, any information, and neither of us had access. We were all like, what's going on? We feel let down, we didn't feel inclusive. And then one person started, where's the interpreter? And during the whole pandemic, she protested and said that we need an interpreter because all of us are struggling to understand what's going on. And but only now it's being recognised. So it's a bit too late, too little too late. So I think most deaf people felt not part of the community, and they felt even worse because they're already struggling with communication barriers, and now this just made everything a lot worse.
Yeah.
I've also noticed that during the pandemic, I wanted to look for a career change, and then I started looking for jobs online. Then I realized lots of jobs they put looking for someone who can use telephone skills, blah blah blah. And then I realized, oh my god, I can't use the telephone. So immediately I feel intimidated by the job role, where I noticed during the pandemic that I didn't have much self-confidence because of my hearing loss. So then this is why I came with the idea of creative ability. So to make more people aware about communication and employment, to have more understanding and what deaf people needs are, and not just about deaf people, also anybody's needs. And I've noticed that during the pandemic, I'm sure everybody with families would help with flexible working hours because they have families, or so, and or people suffer with mental health, and everyone talking about mental health, but no one's actually talking about disability, and it's still a touchy subject where everyone feels like, oh, so you're deaf or you have this disability. So if everyone just talked about it normally and say what they actually do, not say we are a company that we're disability confident, we just show that you're disability confident, show that you have an understanding. And that's what I noticed in the pandemic, and it took me a lot. And then I realized I'm now more I accept myself of being hard of hearing, deaf, whereas before I was embarrassed, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't hear you. But now I'm like, well, I am deaf and I need support. And I think it works both ways, not always relying on companies or a hearing person to understand us. It's also our effort too. It's a joint effort.
Yeah, and deaf is that's the right word, isn't it? Because I fell into the trap when we were first speaking. I was thinking, oh, maybe I should say hard of hearing, to cover people who aren't completely deaf.
Yeah.
So even in my ignorance almost, I was not really sure, you're not sure what word to use, and you had to say it's fine, like the word is deaf, that is the word, whether it's one ear, both ears, a little bit.
Yeah. I even found it uncomfortable to say the word deaf, and then I realized, hang on a minute, what's going on?
Yeah.
So the correct terminology is deaf, but the reason people say hard of hearing or profound or moderate is because that's what is used in medical terms. But the actual word is deaf. And what I've noticed that people think when you say the word deaf, they start talking to you like this.
Yeah.
Hello. And it's like, no, you can speak to me normally. And
because you're amazing at lip reading. Your lip reading is very good. And then do you have a hearing aid in both ears?
I have 2 hearing aids in both ears. I was born deaf, so I caught the measles, and I was diagnosed quite late, 3 years old. So imagine from age of 3, I had no communication.
Yeah.
My mother used to say to me, you are such a good child, you're such a good baby. Even
because I couldn't hear anything.
I couldn't hear anything. And she would go, you're so good, you just looked at me when you wanted food. And I was like, Mum, you should have known then. But now technology, and we've moved forward, hearing tests are available, where if I was a baby, there was no hearing test, it was like a rattling toy. So of course the baby's going to react when they see a rattling toy because it's moving.
Wow.
So she's hearing.
And Gu, tell me about how many people there are in the UK that are deaf.
There are 11 million deaf and hard of hearing in the UK, and I don't think many people realize there's so many out there, and not everybody use sign language. So deaf people use communication in different ways. It could be a note taker, it could be they need someone to clarify the situation by lip reading, relay information in a simpler, easier way of translating. And what and a BSL interpreter. So me, I don't know if I've told you this, but where I worked previously, I had a meeting of 40 people around, where we have a big meeting, 40 people. And I felt, oh my God, I feel confident. You know, everyone knows I'm deaf. No one treats me differently. I'm going to ask an interpreter. And I thought, 40 people, I'm going to struggle. Like, it's people putting their hand up, asking questions. So I thought, all right, I'm going to accept this. And then, so I asked for an interpreter, and she said, no, we can't provide a British Sign Language interpreter because of private and confidential matter. I said, they work on private and confidential matter. This is like, they're highly trained, qualified. And she would like, no, not having it. And then I had to persuade her.
Yeah.
I felt really uncomfortable. And then I realized, so then this is what happened. And then she said, oh, hi, Gü, the meeting is cancelled. I thought, oh my God, after all that palaver, it's so difficult to find an interpreter. So the next day going to work, and everybody's had this meeting. Going to this meeting because they didn't want the interpreter there. Then for the first time in my life, well, one of the first time in my life, that I felt really excluded and felt really stupid. Like, I'm not able to fit in. It was something so small that made my feeling like it wasn't valid. And I didn't miss much, Gü, don't worry. And then I was just so upset by it, because when I went to university, I was adamant I am not going to use an interpreter because I don't want to be seen different. And then I realized after university, I'm not going to put myself in that situation again. And I've noticed like some of the deaf community feel uncomfortable. So I think if we all talk about it, like we talk about, like I was saying, going to the coffee shop and choosing your milk. So where before Starbucks will only have full fat or semi-skim, now you have a whole range of different milks.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't need to ask, you just say, I'll have that, please.
Yeah.
Same analogy. And
And before the pandemic, so a couple of years ago, we were talking about the fact that there are nowhere near enough interpreters in London, let alone in the UK, for the number of deaf people that there are. Did that get better during the pandemic? Was that, you know, because was it easier to find interpreters that could work online, or?
Much easier, because nowadays, well, when I say nowadays, before, when booking an interpreter, it was you had to book it 1 month in advance, always booked ahead. Well, with the pandemic, everyone could do online interpreting, which is great. They could be in Scotland, whereas before COVID, it would have to be face to face. But now we can find more interpreters around the world. Well, not around the world, because British Sign Language, but for example.
Although we still struggled for today, didn't we? We still struggled to find an interpreter today. So it is still a challenge. Yeah. And actually what we're going to do, I should have said this at the start, is when we issue this as a recording for people to watch back, we're going to add the subtitles. So this will have subtitles afterwards. But that was the best that we could do, because there was still a shortage. So
also, to book an interpreter, most of us would need an access to work budget, and it's a government fund that helps people into work. So at the moment, I don't have an access to work budget, but when I do apply, I will definitely use an interpreter, and it's really helpful with deaf people in the workplace.
So I'm jumping around a bit because I know we had some questions lined up, but I want to, you've just started to talk about what we can do at work for people. And when we spoke before about how remote working has been really good for some people. So, parents quite appreciate the flexibility, or people that live out, far away from their office, that's been really helpful. But, for the deaf community, and maybe disabilities more broadly, what have you found useful? What adjustments have you had to make, for your own remote working? And therefore, what can businesses and HR offer people to make remote working accessible for everyone?
Yeah. Well, I've realised during this pandemic is to let people know what your needs are and what support you need from day one. Because if you don't say anything, then it becomes really awkward, and then there's a shock. It's like, you didn't tell us. Oh my God, you need help. You're deaf, but I didn't think that you were really deaf. I think people learning and understanding the needs of deaf people as a matter of course, not just waiting, to employ one also, and this will make the organisation more appealing to us and remove the anxiety that a lot of people experience when applying for jobs.
You talked, Gu, about having 2 screens, which I know some people have. Yeah. I only like having one, but you said that was essential.
Yes, I've noted, like during Zoom or Team, that if you want to have your notes on, then the person on the camera shrinks. So then how does a deaf person lip read? Then you're like coming close to the camera. Hello, sorry, repeat yourself. So now, yes, I think it's so important that we have 2 screens, so then we can see our notes and the picture frame.
Yeah.
And the deaf community was saying, oh my God, how do we get the interpreters and the notes and the
yeah. And you also said when our head of marketing, Zoe, was on the call, and if there's then some, if there are lots of people on the call, everyone's faces are very small. So then it's, so you need to change the view, right? So that you've got the speaker view. So you just have like someone as big as possible, so you can read their lips.
Definitely, the view, it does change the view, and I think maybe we need to invent something. Someone out there need to invent something that had to have it both ways, where we can have the screen big as the note page. And I think during the pandemic, it's just making people aware that we focus on lip reading and facial expression.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about like someone in the office having a bad day, but a deaf person is so sensitive, and I'm happy to admit that I'm very sensitive and I read faces a bit too deeply. So then if someone like looking sad or pissed off, I think, oh my God, you're upset with me?
Yeah.
You're like this to me? What have I done? But I think it's because we sense energy and facial expression and body language. It's
And you were also saying, as we return to the office, lots of offices are changing the layouts, making more collaborative spaces, because the office will be somewhere where you go to collaborate and work together. And you made a really good point about seating arrangements. So I think you were saying that, you would want to be facing people. Ideally, you want to, you don't want your back to anyone, because you can't hear those people that are behind you.
Yeah, totally.
And also the window, about the light.
Yeah, so if we have like really bright light shining into your face and you're talking, all we see is a shadow, a cast over your face. So then we see the shadow moving, and then we're like, oh, can you come into the other side? But yeah, seating is really important, because I know everyone probably fights for the best seating in the office. But I think we also like, oh my God, we need to be facing everybody rather than the back to everybody. And so we can see what's going on. I don't think people realise that when you don't hear, we look more and we give more eye contact.
Yeah.
And then people are thinking, why did she keep looking at me? It's making me uncomfortable. I'm like, sorry, I'm not looking at you. I'm just read your lips.
Yeah.
And
So
I've had people say to me, you stare at me for too long. I was
really? Oh, Gü.
sorry, it just, maybe I should have got glasses earlier, but I lip read and I'm trying to understand what you're saying to me. I've been in so many situations where people felt uncomfortable, and I think now is the perfect time to make everyone aware and be comfortable
Yeah.
questions and how you became deaf, and not just deafness, is people with disabilities, and talk about what they need in the workplace and how can that person just make you feel comfortable.
Yeah. And I was reading this morning that many deaf and disabled people feel that self-employment is the only way that they can work, because businesses still aren't particularly good at advertising in a way that's inclusive, the jobs, interviewing in a way that's inclusive. Lots of them, like you said, want to talk on the phone.
Like, this is the reason why I've decided to become self-employed, is because I still feel intimidated, because even though I have a degree and experiences of working in production, I'm not trying to boost myself, I've done this and that, but it's just somebody who had all the education as an average person would go through, still feel that is not accessible. And I think sometimes, what if creative abilities, I'm not being negative, but it doesn't happen, what am I going to do? Like, so that's why I believe you just have to stick to it and just spread more awareness. But yes, definitely deaf people are becoming getting more self-employment. So for example, they're becoming influencers on social media, another form of expression, fitness influencers, fashion, and also if you put in Google, what jobs can deaf people do? I've tried that. And it's so funny, it just says speech and language therapist or teacher of the deaf.
And you told me a horrific story about because you trained in TV, didn't you?
Yeah, I trained into TV and production film, and so I started as opera runner, and then got the job, and it was so exciting. Finished my degree, got the job, and you know how hard it is to get a job, and then did it for 6 years, and then one day we had new management, and she changed the whole but not system, but the restructure in the company. And then she offered everybody a job informally, and also me. And then when I said, and she said, so she picked up on something I couldn't do, which is the phone. So within those 6 years, everybody knew how to communicate with me, email, and that's what everyone really did. No one really hardly used the phone. I thought, okay, I'm feeling comfortable. And then when she picked that up, I then thought, oh my God, maybe I'm not good enough. And then in the end, she then gave everyone the formal written offer, a job offer, except me. And I thought there was a mistake. I thought, why haven't I got the email? And everyone has. I've had the informal meeting. And then I had a meeting with her and head of HR, and they said, we've never offered you a job informally. I was like, you've offered it to everyone, but I was young and I didn't know my right. And then they said, well, we know a deaf guy that works in the warehouse that packs boxes. Maybe you can work with him. I got so upset. I was like,
it's awful.
I went to university. I've worked with you for 6 years, and then you tell me this now. I've had no problem. So I left. Until this day, it made me more passionate to stop this from happening to anyone. And it's not about people who are scared to employ, the fear of employing a person who is deaf or a disability, because it's the fear of unknown.
I think, Gu, it's made you passionate, but and really the listeners are getting a good insight. But I mean, I've heard loads of these stories. I've heard
Yeah.
much worse from you over the years, these
Oh, me.
stories. And I do think it's made you one of the most resilient people that I've ever met.
Thank you.
If I think about, you know, resilience is one of Varan's competencies. So all of the consultancies have to work towards increasing their resilience because it's such an important skill.
Yeah.
And I think going through really difficult experiences builds resilience. But this is a very timely topic, right? Resilience, because I think after the pandemic, people's resilience is quite low. And
Yeah.
so I wondered what can we learn from you and from the deaf community about being resilient? You know, how can others on the call develop that in themselves and also in their teams, their colleagues, because it's much needed right now.
I believe, like, from my experiences, I see it today, it's positive, it's made me the person who I am today. So I would just say, go into any situation thinking you can do it. Why can't you? If the other person can do it, you can. What's stopping you? The only thing that's stopping you is yourself. And I think if we talk to our little brain and we're being negative, then our anxiety is going to be heightened, and we get, I do it to myself today. I do it to myself all the time, but I've got to say, I've got to do it, push myself. And I think everybody can do that. And during this pandemic, I think a lot of us had learned more empathy with one another and more understanding with everybody's background, what they're going through or what they're not going through. Because when people go into the office, I'm sure you're dressed in a certain way. You come into an office and you put that mask on your face and you're like, hi, good morning, and you get on with the day and you go home and life is different. And I think now people are in more vulnerable situations. You're having Zoom or Team in your own home.
Yeah.
And so people are showing their vulnerability in their true selves. They're at home. You can see everything.
Yeah. And something that comes up a lot is having a strong social network, you know, a strong network around you. But you brought up a really good point, which was that during COVID, actually deaf people quite often live with a hearing family. So you might assume that it would be easier for a deaf person during COVID or during remote working because they've got their family around them, or their spouse. But actually, if they're hearing, you can feel even more isolated.
Exactly. Like, I don't know if you're aware, like most deaf people hate Christmas Day because most of their family.
That's, I know so it's sad.
I'm not trying to be depressing on here. We are very happy people, but I'm just so all their family are hearing, so they're like, oh, thank God Christmas is finished, because now, and then like to use their hand and they're like, oh, I'm signing away. But then it's the same with the pandemic. Is most of the deaf community have hearing parents who cannot sign. For one, had parents who cannot sign either. So when I take my hearing aids off, I can't hear. But if you speak to my mother, she's very loud, and she would go, well, you speak properly, you speak well because of me. But so where deaf people with deaf families, they're very confident people.
Yeah, because they're all speaking the same language. So you can speak anytime.
Exactly. And I've met them and think, wow, you're so confident, like you don't let anything affect you. Where a person who is raised with a hearing family, you can see the difference. And also, I'm probably going off in one, but also all deaf people, we all have different education, different background, and not all of us are the same.
So I like the idea of maybe the network, right? The network is important. Do you find you have lots of deaf friends and acquaintances?
This is, you would assume so, but no. it's because I went to a mainstream school.
Mm.
So this is going to sound depressing, but I'm not that to anything. But I think with me, it was because I went to a mainstream school. I used to wear these hearing aid boxes, radio aid boxes. And, you know, in the 90s, technology wasn't as forward as today. So these wires were short. So I had this little box and I had to walk around like this. It was connected to my hearing aids. So the hearing peers used to look at me, the odd one, the deaf one in the class.
Yeah.
And then when I go to the deaf unit for extra support, they will say to me, oh, you're not really deaf, you're hearing. So it's like it's not a win-win situation. So I've always struggled to make friends when I was younger because I never felt accepted.
Yeah.
It's only now I feel like, hang on a minute, this is who I am.
And I think this is a good lesson for HR people, for business leaders, for colleagues generally, that sense of belonging. And we're going to talk about this on the next webinar, actually, at the end of August. I think the sense of belonging is potentially at the moment the most important factor for people at work, purpose and belonging. And it's starting to overtake pay and financial rewards and benefits, that feeling of belonging and being accepted. Exactly. So I guess what businesses could do is create as many opportunities as possible, especially now that we're remote and we're not in the office as much, to belong to a society, a group, a forum, a community, about anything. It could be for deaf and disabled, it could be about an interest, it could be, you know, a sustainability club for people that are interested in that. So I think that's really important and may have been lost over the last year or so with remote working.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely belonging. If you don't feel belong, I'm sure everybody feels that office feeling.
Yeah, well, that's what keeps you in a company, I think, isn't it? Is that feeling, you know, the feeling that you belong and that you're needed and valued.
Of course.
I want to talk about communication because, you know, you touched on this. You said that you read emotions, and I know when I'm with you, I'm probably more expressive than I might be, because I know that's important. And I remember you saying to me before that towards the end of the day, when people are a bit more tired, they've been on webinars all day, they've been on Zoom, on Teams, and they sit and they're very, you know, very straight-faced. And you're thinking, what's wrong?
What's wrong? What's happened? I think.
What else can we learn about communication? You know, I think hearing people, we rely on the words, whereas if you're deaf, you read people's faces, people's body language, which again, you can only see my neck and my head. So I have to bring my hands up so that I can express more. What else can we learn?
Also, eye contact is so important, because then if you're not giving us eye contact, it means that you don't want to talk to us.
Yeah.
So when you turn away, we read it as person's not interested. But on your side, it's probably, well, I was going to say you can hear, and you don't need to always give eye contact. But but I notice a lot of hearing people, when they meet me and they start talking to like the deaf community, they give more eye contact than they've ever did, and they know about themselves too, because you probably, or anybody else, has a different personality they've not discovered. So once you come into the deaf community, you will then realize, oh, I have this in me, I have the potential to sign, I want to do this. It's interesting to see. But definitely eye contact, clear lip, so make sure your lips and your teeth are clean. People talk with their food in their mouth and like, please finish what you're eating and then talk to me. Or men with moustaches. Oh my god.
Of course. Oh no.
So I'm like, why would you have a moustache? You can't see your lip. But then it's crazy.
I'm not a fan of a moustache, so I can back that one up. I can support that.
Yeah, or just trim it so we can then read. And then, you know, people have lip pattern where they don't move their lip, they talk like this. And then you're like, uh-oh, what do I do? How do I tell that person, open your mouth and talk to me?
Yeah.
And then it worked.
Yeah.
And then
And
definitely think of an experience I've been through. But definitely, you know, when you go to a very formal place, let's say the bank, and you've got a queue behind you, and people tend to be a bit grumpy at the banks. They don't know why, but they pull faces like, hurry up, I'm not in the mood. And then you get the lady going, how much do you want to put into your bank? And I'm like, shit, anybody to know. And I've had like people, when you go to a coffee shop ordering coffee, and they have a system, you know, single shot or double shot or small, large or medium. So I think I go in confidently thinking I'm going to ask for a single shot oat latte, that's it, and then that's going to be the end of the conversation. As soon as they say what size, one shot, they repeat, and I'm like, I'm prepared for this. But they're so used to looking down.
Yeah.
It's always a good idea to look up.
Yeah.
But then it's still difficult to tell people actually I'm deaf, but I should walk in with a big badge.
And you know, all of this is really important to do, whether you know there's a deaf person on the call or not. So Varan is a business of 80 people, and I know at least 5 that have some hearing loss, you know. So and I think that as people get older as well, and they just naturally lose some hearing, they really don't want to say anything. You know, my mum is only 50, and her hearing is really bad in one ear, but because she's so young, she doesn't want to tell people I'm deaf in this ear. So I think there's a lot of that. And so if we all communicate in this way anyway, you know, more expressive, more eye contact, focusing on the conversation. So this is happening a lot now, and I find myself doing it because we're remote working and we're so busy. We've got one screen open on the call, we're doing something else. You know, it's not good practice. It's not polite.
It needs to be changed, that's all. And if we change it, and then it will become a natural habit. And I think it's really important too that I've noticed with company that HR must put in a system that an understanding of access to work on their company, to show that they're aware of access to work.
And is access for work is that's an allowance that an individual can apply to from the government, is that right? For things like interpreters and
note takers or anything that helps them with in the workplace. So then the company doesn't have to pay from their so it's actually we pay, so the government gives us the budget, and then it comes out of our budget. And also it'd be good to show that understanding, and they put it on the company site, and also when they're job adverts, say that you are welcome for people to apply for a role, and if there are reasonable adjustments in place, we can provide that for you.
Exactly.
So if you say that, then already we feel, oh, they understand.
And that's a legal requirement, I think, isn't it? I was reading this morning about, I think there's like an Equality Act, there's various acts passed by government that say that you have to say that there will be reasonable adjustments made, but I don't see it often.
Exactly, that everybody has to say, but what companies are not showing is they're following it through, that they're really genuine, not it's on our policy document. Really, really mean what you're saying. Sorry if that sounds really.
Has anyone in the audience got any questions before I kind of maybe pick one more and then round things up with Gu? Any questions at all? So while we're just seeing if any questions come in, you know, my final question, we always end on one thinking about the future. So what do you think that the pandemic will bring, for the future of work, the future of HR? So, what are the long-term changes that will be here forever because of the last
I definitely
18
think
months?
flexible working from home, flexibility. Definitely more technology will be used, and also more opportunities for people. So then people can apply for work, and the companies in Scotland, anywhere around the world, and you can work for that company from working from home. I know somebody who works for a company in by the coastal and lives in America.
Yeah.
How she does it with the time difference, amazing. But it just definitely more opportunities, more awareness, like captions will be available everywhere. I think as time goes by, people will be more comfortable.
So Zoe's asked a really good question, which is, should companies be employing interpreters for interviews? So for the interview and recruitment process?
Yes, fantastic question. Really glad for that. So yes, I think it's always better for a company to say, would you like an interpreter? Not do you require one? That would be brilliant, and then we feel already included.
Yeah.
I think that should be a natural thing for the HR company to do. Any company. So yeah.
And our colleague Becky said, fantastic insight into your working life, Gu, and I've learned so much. She said, thank you very much. And she said that her mum listened in as well, because she's working remotely. She's working in Cornwall. She says her mum listened in and said you are remarkable, and I fully agree.
Thank
So
you.
that's nice. Thanks for your comment, Becky.
You.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I'll wrap it up for today's webinar. We're going to be talking next month with SAP, actually, because they've been running a similar series of webinars to this about very non-technology issues. We've been thinking about the bigger questions around work and life, and we're going to talk about this belonging, this purpose, especially because all the newspapers are talking about the big resign, the great resign, the great resignation, everyone leaving their jobs, because they're rethinking what's important to them. Work-life balance, maybe money is less important, and other things, flexibility, well-being becoming more important to people. So it'd be really good if you could enjoy that webinar with us. So that's going to be on the 26th of August, if anyone would like to sign up for that one, talking all about belonging and purpose, and really why some employers are pushing employees away and pushing them to quit. So that's going to be a really fun conversation. Gu, thank you so much again. You were really nervous before this, and you seem very calm.
I was really nervous. I'm not used to talking. I'm normally used to listening. And
you seem very relaxed,
focused, and now I'm having to talk, and which is great. I need to have more practice, but thank you for making me feel comfortable. It was great. The discussion.
It was so much fun. It was an absolute pleasure. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you again, Gu, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.